Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Jazz Talk, one of my favorite segments on Jazzy Fridays.
I'm done spending.
That's no way that just happened to me. No way that just. Carson, are you seeing this? Did you just see what happened to me, Carson?
No.
Oh, there we go. Now I played Jazzy Fridays. Anyways, Jazzy Fridays. Sorry about that. Really bad first impression. Anyways, today's special guest is Carson King. Carson, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for coming on to the show. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're the first non-saxophone player in, fun fact, which is exciting because too much saxophone talk. Am I right?
Raising the bar, having a bassist on.
Exactly. We're very, very different. But anyways, Carson, please tell them about yourself. Tell them what you play, what year you are, and any accomplishments you're proud of.
Yeah, I am. My name's Carson. I'm a bass player. I am a junior here at WT and music business, and I played in the jazz band, WT's Jazz Band 2 for 2 years, and I've done several gigs all around. I played with the 3.14 PMA big band for a couple of years, and I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do you? So your primary instrument is bass, right?
Yes. Bass.
How long have you been playing bass for?
I started electric bass in my junior year of high school. I played trombone prior to that, and I started stand-up bass when I got here to college. So I've been playing stand-up for 2.5 years.
I see.
And trombone is actually where I started my jazz career, I guess.
I see, okay.
I played in our high school's jazz band on trombone. And then I thought, bass doesn't look that hard. And I was right.
So how long have you been getting into jazz? Since like your freshman year of high school, or?
Yeah, freshman year of high school is when it all started. And it was big band jazz and Glenn Miller tunes.
Okay, yeah.
Great stuff that really introduced me. I hate to say it, but I hadn't heard a lot of standards until I got up here. And it opened a whole new world for my jazz playing.
What did you prefer jazz style or jazz wise, trombone or bass?
Oh, bass for sure.
Bass?
For sure.
Elaborate on it, please.
I don't understand. So bass kind of like sits in the background, and it gives me the ability to kind of innovate and try and be somewhat of a lyrical instrument without being noticed.
I see. Okay.
I don't understand how people like on saxophone or trombone or whatever, how they can go on and put together a rhythm or a melody that actually sounds like something. I have to write it out.
Yeah.
But when I sit there and I look at chords and I'm doing a walking bass line or something, I can create a feel rather than worrying about a melody. And I find that to be much more engaging.
Yeah, I see.
Than stumbling around on notes on trombone.
Yeah, I feel you. So you are in the orchestra. You are in this WT Symphony.
Yes.
How different is the style of playing from a symphony to a jazz setting?
It's really different, actually. There's a lot of stuff, specifically on bass. We do play some jazzy tunes a lot.
Yeah.
In WT's orchestra, but with bass, there's like a lot of ways of holding the instrument itself that change when you go into orchestra. You use the bow a lot more in orchestra, but whenever you do pizzicato, when you're plucking notes, the angle that you do it at and the amount of weight you use is much different in orchestra literature than it is from jazz.
Yeah.
So it's actually really different, and the techniques required are completely different. And I've met a lot of people who are these great orchestra musicians, and they play in these professional orchestras, and they don't know a thing about playing in jazz, or vice versa. People who can play in jazz, but they just don't have those separate skills for orchestra. It's much more different than you'd think. Honestly.
Yeah. I get you. How different is like, how do you think, or I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's your opinion on people that use electric bass for jazz? Wait.
In general?
In general, yeah. Like, do you think it's like better? Every song is better with an actual upright bass instead of electric bass? Because I know a lot of modern jazz bands in high schools, they're like, oh yeah, let's go electric bass all the way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from just it's easier to set up.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lighter instrument.
Easier to
And
hear.
I'm one of those people. If I play a gig and I'm given the option, I'm going to choose electric bass because
see, okay.
I can carry it easier.
Yeah. Big hassle.
Yeah, but I didn't think I would, but I've grown to like the stand-up, and I think it definitely has a place. I don't hate the electric bass, but I think it depends. It really depends on the style. Some of these faster tunes, some of these more modern tunes, actually, I feel like electric bass tends to stand a little better.
Like a lot of the Gordon Goodwin pieces.
But you know, I wouldn't say that stand-up bass is not preferred in any way.
Yeah, I get you.
It really depends. I think they both, interestingly, I think they both actually hold the same amount of bandwidth in the jazz world.
I see.
Even though one is, I'd say, become a lot more popular than the other in the past 50 years.
I see. What were some of your jazz role models growing up?
Jazz role models. I started bass because of the Beatles, McCartney, and I stumbled upon his jazz album Kisses on the Bottom, which introduced me to a whole new world of jazz that I hadn't experienced through school jazz.
I see.
And since I got here, I've done a lot more digging, and people I've run into are Count Basie's big band. I love Count Basie's big band. It's his music I never get tired of. I actually planning some of it for my senior recital. And his bassist was John Clayton, and who is probably, in my opinion, probably the best jazz bassist around. I have never heard Clayton play on anything that didn't send shivers down my spine. And he's still going around and playing all kinds of shows. And then there's Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, all of them. They speak to me a little less because they don't come from the bass world. But yeah, it was mainly just Glenn Miller, Count Basie, and John Clayton, who have been my primary influences for learning jazz.
What about some role models that you knew personally? What are some of the role models you have in band and an orchestra that you're like, wow, I really want to replicate how I sound to how they play?
Oh man, that's difficult. On bass, it's hard to say. I came from a really small town where nobody knew how to play bass, so I was just kind of figuring it out. I think after I got here, I've heard Dr. Scales play a lot.
Yeah.
And he's got this incredible way he plays. And I don't want to be him, but I do listen to him play, and there's stuff that he can just pull out of nowhere that I wish I could do, and I try to replicate that. Another person a little closer is Joe David Roma. He talks himself down a lot, but he's got an incredible feel when he plays, and I do try to replicate it a little bit, but I also I'm very conscious to try to not copy people.
I get you.
And kind of do my own mediocre thing.
So as you know, every single instrument in a jazz band is really important, but why do you think a bass is? They kind of say sometimes the bass is like, the drums are, of course, the thing that runs the tempo. But a lot of people say the bass is what keeps everything together. Why do you think people think that way? And why do you think the bass is so important to a jazz band?
I don't know. I wouldn't. Maybe it's because I'm playing the instrument. I feel like the drums are the most important most of the time.
But like you said earlier, the bass is just, nobody really notices the bass. But
I do think it adds that texture because there have been a lot of times where I'll play a tune and I don't necessarily know how the tune goes. And the drums will give me a bar, and that gives me the feel. It tells me if it's a swing tune, if it's a bossa, and then I can build off that, and then that builds. I think the drums give you the feel, and then the bass gives you texture, and without that texture, it just feels hollow. I could probably find you some jazz tunes that don't have drums, but I probably wouldn't be able to find you a jazz tune that doesn't have a bass.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, I have this next little segment that I like to do with my guest. It's called "Is This Jazz or Not?" where I ask you questions to see if you think certain things are jazz or not. All right. First one, very popular one, may I add. Do you think Frank Sinatra is jazz?
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
Okay.
It's a unique style of jazz. I think it was referred to as like cigar lounge jazz.
Okay, I see.
But I do think it classifies as
Jazz?
Yeah, as jazz.
Okay, next up is Leve. Is Leve jazz?
It's a modern artist, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
modern.
I haven't listened to much after the 2000s.
Oh, I see.
No,
Okay.
from what I've heard, I don't know. I've heard a little bit, and it has been jazz.
Okay.
But also, the only things I've heard from her are actual. I've heard Misty.
Yes.
Which
I have
is
Misty on here.
undoubtedly jazz.
Yes.
So I think you could say yes. I'm very uninformed on that topic.
Yeah. Okay.
If that's kind of like where she's going, yeah.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, yes, I'd consider it as jazz.
Okay. Would you consider video game music jazz, or ones that have a jazz feeling to them?
I would. It's weird. I'd consider it jazzy music. I wouldn't necessarily consider it jazz.
I see. Okay.
Because I think it has to do with the reason it was written.
Mm-hmm.
It's written. Something I see a lot is Mario Kart music.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's got a big band and it's pumping and it's all over the place and it's high octane, but it was also written with the intent of making you feel that adrenaline and making you feel that bump because you want to race and you want to be fast.
Yeah.
And I consider jazz to be written just for the enjoyment of the music. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it like you said, it is jazzy music, but I wouldn't consider it on its own jazz. I would never program it
I see.
for a jazz recital if I had the option.
I see what you mean. Okay, next up is with a lot of a fear of AI, as they say. Do you think so? Like a lot of modern music is starting to use more fake instruments, as like a keyboard plays a saxophone sound and it makes a whole big band. Would you consider that jazz since there's not actual like 20 musicians playing all together?
Of course. I mean, if it's being when you say AI, it sounds more like you're talking about like synthesizers.
Well, not necessarily, but like a human is not making the noises.
I don't think you necessarily need humans to make jazz. I've heard jazz pieces that are unaccompanied bass, unaccompanied saxophone.
I see.
I think it can be in any field. I mean, I've heard jazz flute or clarinet, and they're not necessarily in a jazz band. I don't think it makes it any less jazz. I think it again depends on the intention behind the music.
Okay, I see. And then last one, there's a lot of songs that have jazz elements into it. For example, a lot of Kendrick Lamar songs has a whole saxophone lick throughout the song. Would you consider those pieces actual jazz songs or just having jazz elements implemented into it?
Jazz elements. Circle back to it. The Beatles had a lot of music with saxophones and clarinets and all this stuff in the back, but it was still rock and roll. You can have those elements and blend them together, and I think that's what makes jazz so interesting, because I think jazz is kind of like you're purely taking those elements and throwing them together, rather than having a song that is built on something and then throwing those jazz elements in. It's it's an amalgamation of all this stuff. But yeah, I think those aren't jazz, but they have jazzy things inside them, which enhance them.
Yeah. Okay. Next question I have for you is, if you had the ability to take the playing ability or the writing ability of any jazz artist, who and why would it be?
John Clayton. And it's because it's
writing or
for his playing ability.
Okay.
Because he and it's because I've been playing his music in the past couple of years a lot, and he has this crazy ability to play at this super high level, and he doesn't necessarily, I don't know, I wouldn't consider him to be the most technically proficient player in the world. But when you play bass, you know, you can use one finger to pluck the strings, you can use two, some use 3 or 4. And Clayton, through his entire career, 40-something years, has only used 2. And he can play anything.
Interesting.
And he can go all over the bass. It's, you know, it doesn't matter the range or the jumps he's doing. He can throw something together anywhere. And I really admire that about him. And he was what inspired me to kind of like try and use 2 fingers rather than one on my bass playing. And I really admire that about him, and his versatility and his flexibility with playing the instrument.
I see, yeah.
I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Perfect. What are some of your favorite jazz subgenres to listen to and to play?
Subgenres?
Yeah.
I love a good ballad.
Yeah.
Misty is probably up there on one of my favorite pieces. There have been so many times I've heard that piece, and it's just spoken to me.
Yeah.
You know? And I love a good swing. The one genre I am not great at, and I don't enjoy all that much, is actually funk, which is weird because it's mainly electric bass, which is what I like to play. But it's so, I admire people who can play it, but it's so difficult for me to jump around and create that fast groove that those songs require. And I like to lay back. Some of my favorite styles in jazz are, you know, the ballads and the slow swings and stuff like that. I think ballads and swings are probably my favorites. I've been getting into a little bebop recently.
Okay, yeah.
A little more recently. I've been listening to a tune called Boplicity, which is a great tune. It's got a great Barry sax solo in it that I've been working on.
I see.
But yeah, it's the swing and ballads are probably my favorites, with ballads taking over.
Perfect. Very, very good subgenres. Yeah. So, you made me lose my train of thought. How is your mindset differently when you're playing an orchestral piece to a jazz piece?
It's interesting because, especially in my field in jazz, it's kind of like when I'm given an orchestral piece and we're rehearsing it, you know, it's I have written out exactly what I'm supposed to do and exactly how I'm supposed to do it, and there's this specific message that is intended by the composer that I need to fulfill.
Okay. Yeah.
And in jazz, a lot of the time I get handed a piece of music and it's just a whole bunch of slashes on a page with chords. You know, there's nothing. You know, and you know, a trumpet might have that in a solo section, but sometimes I'll have that for the entire piece.
Interesting.
So when I'm in orchestra or in band, I try to, you know, play what's on the page and try to give the emotion that I'm either told by the director that I need to be giving, or what I think they're trying to give. With jazz, most of the time when I play it, I actually put what I think of the piece into how I play.
Okay.
Because I've been given nothing, you know. I just have slashes on a page, so I sit there and I put my own thoughts and my own message into what I'm playing, and I try to put that across.
Interesting. Yeah, I see. In your personal opinion, is it more fun to play in an orchestral setting or a jazz setting?
Oh, it's so much more fun to play jazz.
Jazz?
It's so much more
Is
fun.
it just like the creative freedom?
The creative freedom is insane. I mean, I played a gig. It's probably one of my favorite memories playing, where our drummer was taking a solo, and he looked at me and he's like, Carson, come here. And then he takes his sticks and he started drumming on my bass.
That's really cool.
You know, and people would look at it and go like, that was really cool that you did that. You know, you can't do that in orchestra. And it's, you know, it's not, it's just fun. You know, you can just have fun with it. You don't have to worry about it all that much. as long as you're just having a good time. An orchestra, you can have a good time.
Yeah.
You definitely can. But it's much more intense and intentional. And jazz is just so much more free, and you can just, if in orchestra, if you're in a performance and you think, I don't really necessarily like this part, I'm gonna try something different. You're gonna get grilled for doing that. It's not gonna go over well. But I've had gigs where I'll play something and I've played it a million times one way, and in the middle of a performance, I think, I don't want to do that this time, and I'll do something different. And that freedom is it's great.
Yeah.
It just allows you to be yourself on the stage when you're performing.
Well, you already got into a little bit one of your favorite memories, but do you have any notable memories of performing or rehearsing from playing jazz?
Performing or rehearsing, one of my when I learned bass in high school, I did it in secret. I didn't tell my parents. I borrowed a school bass. I snuck it out of the house. And my parents found out at the jazz concert.
I see.
When I walked up to the stage without my trombone and picked up a bass. And I played a solo at that concert. And it was bad.
Okay.
It was bad. But it's definitely one of my favorite moments. And I kind of swore off soloing from that moment.
Yeah.
Until my freshman year, which was probably my second favorite jazz moment from my own playing, is where we played a funk tune where I was already pretty uncomfortable with the tune itself.
Okay.
And Dr. Barger asked me to take a solo, and I had to write out one, and I played it, and it went pretty well. It's never perfect, but it went really well, and I was really proud of that. And that's probably one of my favorite. It's the first time in my life I had felt good about a solo.
I see. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about soloing. What kind of goes through your mind as you're playing a solo? Either it be improvised or written out.
So it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people about soloing and how they approach it, and some people have asked me for advice on how to solo, and I never feel like I know how to answer, because when I look at my bass, I can visualize the entire solo on the fingerboard. I can see exactly where I'm going to go, like looking at keys on a piano. With like trombone or something, I guess you can kind of do that, but I'm thinking of one position at a time or one note. Saxophone, I think I can't think of multiple notes at a time, but I can draw like a little line on my bass where it's like my finger needs to go here, and then it goes here, and then it goes here and up here. So whenever I solo, or whenever I'm playing in general, I just think of these shapes that I've built into my mind of muscle memory shapes. So if I see a major chord, I have a muscle memory for what a major chord is. And then I know, I can kind of think, outside of that box a little bit and throw in some stuff that I know will fit. But I think based on these shapes that I've built in my head, rather than necessarily thinking in scales. Sometimes the shapes are scales and the scales come out. But I don't, whenever I solo, I don't think, I'm going to go into a Mixolydian solo and then transfer into my Lydian solo in the second section. It's all just shapes that I mess with. And it leads to me not being able to define exactly how I play a lot or exactly what I played. But it's what works for me.
Yeah.
So it's the method I figured out.
So how often do you have gigs out, like not school related?
It depends. Recently, I've played a lot more in the past year. You kind of have to get your name out there. This past year, I will play probably 1 or 2 gigs a month, which I feel very lucky. Because if I weren't a bass player, I probably would not have that luxury. Because they're picking from about a lot of about 6 people in this area. So that's a real luxury for me. And I've I when I play gigs, I'll play jazz gigs all the time, and I've also played with, local musicals at the Amarillo Theater. They had a jazz kind of themed show, and they had me come in and play it. But yeah, I'll play 1 to 2 gigs a month normally,
Okay, yeah.
and then I had 1 month where I think I played 7 gigs.
Dang.
It was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that many people are needing a bass player all at one time.
So I know getting gigs is like pretty rare in the jazz world, or like a pretty like nice feeling to get a gig. What was going through your mind, and what feelings did you feel when you got called up to have your first outside of school gig?
Yeah, the first few gigs I played were because somebody at school was offered them, and then they said, I can't do it. Do you want to do it? And that was exciting. But this past year was the first time Patrick Swindell, who's a singer local, he called me directly and asked me if I was ready for a day, which I ended up playing that gig, and it's a great feeling, to be in demand. It's definitely different to, be given a gig.
Yeah.
To being offered one. It's an incredible
Really
experience.
good feeling. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, how important do you think it is to have connections in jazz band? As you said earlier, you have to get your name out there to get these gigs. But why is it so important that people find these connections all over the place in the jazz world?
It's connections are the most important thing. I think you have to be more connected than you have to be a good instrumentalist. The thing is whenever you're playing somewhere, like say there's a little restaurant you want to play at, they're taking a risk. Especially if they don't know who you are, if you don't have material to present them with, or they don't have somebody to speak on your behalf, they don't know they don't know if people are gonna walk into their restaurant, hear you play, and go, I don't want to be here,
Yeah.
And that leads to a lot of the times you have to play gigs for free.
Yeah.
And I recommend that people do that every once in a while. But getting your name out there and getting a reputation more than connections sometimes is super important, because it's the only way that you can build trust with people that you don't know.
I see.
Because these people are, the people you're playing for are always going to be business owners, and they don't want to take a loss. And it's hard to trust somebody that you've never met before. And the only way you can do that is by building those connections and a reputation outside of it.
Well, what is your hope for jazz in the near future, whether it be in the next 5 years or the next 10 years?
I don't know. I hope it continues to be more mainstream. I think it's been growing mainstream-wise. I think a lot of people have been picking up on it, and I think that's really good. I also hope that jazz doesn't fall back into... I hope people continue to try to innovate and be interesting rather than just falling back to what jazz was. I'm not saying I think the entire genre should change on a whole, but I think people should continue to try and create new things, because that's what it was all about in the beginning, and continue to create that jive.
Yeah. Well, we're wrapping up on the interview, sadly, but do you have any words of advice, or just want to get your words out there to young jazz musicians that are aspiring to have a future in jazz and start gigging?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice I can give is, when you're starting out, look at the greats. It seems like I didn't take the advice for a long time, but if you watch videos of those guys playing, all those Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, you watch videos of them playing, you listen to records, and you try to emulate what they can do, it propels you forward faster than you could ever imagine. It wasn't until I started listening to Clayton and trying to replicate him that I felt like I made really any progress in my practice.
I see.
And it's very important to do that.
Well, this next little segment is a time for you to shout out any jazz musicians that you'd like, any of your peers that you just want to give a shout out to, any gigs that you might be happening soon that you want to shout out. So the floor is yours for that.
Oh, well, gigs? No, I don't have any going on right now. So if anybody's interested, give me a call. Someone, Austin Brazil is a jazz musician I've seen recent and like locally that is, really good. He's a guitar player, and I'd really recommend going out to see him when you can. And I gotta shout out Dr. Scales here on campus.
Yeah.
He plays all the time, all these gigs, and he is great.
Yeah.
It is you've never seen a man play the bass like he can. So,
awesome.
Anytime you see his name on a flyer, you got to go out and see it.
You gotta go.
It's a must see.
Well, perfect. So what I like to do now, Carson, is I like to get a recommendation from my guest what song to play next. So what was your recommendation going to be today?
I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter.
By?
It was recording by Paul McCartney.
There we go. Back again once to the Beatles. But anyways, thank you, Carson, again for coming on to Jazzy Fridays. I think it was a good interview. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was really fun. Of course, we're going to take our Polaroid. You don't want to miss that. So make sure to stay tuned and look out for those and the post, of course. But anyways, I hope everyone has a good spring break. Carson, I hope you have a good spring break. We'll be back. We'll play Carson's song. We'll play a little announcements, more tunes, and we'll go straight to Elliot's side reads right after that. So once again, thank you, Carson. I hope everyone has a good day. I'll catch you all in a little bit. Goodbye.